So tocilizumab is a biologic medication that blocks IL-6, which is basically a cytokine or like a protein that causes inflammation. And it has a lot of different effects. I'll go into some of them. It was actually been around for a while. It was approved for use in rheumatoid arthritis in 2010. So we have had it around and use in our patients for a while. But only recently in 2017, it was approved to be used in giant cell arteritis, or this type of large vessel vasculitis, as a subcutaneous injection. And it did so well in the trials that the FDA actually granted it breakthrough approval for this. So what it does, the medication basically binds that little protein or that cytokine that's floating around and prevents it from attaching to its receptor on the cell and causing a lot of this downstream inflammation that happens and causes damage in the body. That little protein I was talking about, it does a lot of things. It can affect your liver. It can make the cells that basically calm your immune system down less effective. It makes the cells that sort of drive inflammatory processes in your body, the B cells and the T cells, it makes them more active and more attacking. So it can be associated with fevers. It can be associated with bone loss. So basically, by blocking the action of that one protein, we're kind of blocking a lot of these problems that can happen in multiple different levels and in multiple different organs. So this is just really brief information on one of the trials that was done to show how well this drug worked. This was a really cool trial, actually. They were able to get a bunch of patients. It was international, multi-center, and they looked at basically this drug, and they were trying to figure out, like I mentioned, I just talked about how difficult steroids can be on your body. And what was cool about this trial was that they were trying to see, we usually have to use steroids for such a long period of time in these patients. And they basically looked at one arm and they were like, can we maybe get people off steroids just faster in half the time that we usually do? And it was actually very effective. So what they found was that patients who were given this drug, either weekly or every 2 weeks, about half of them were still in remission at a year, compared to only like 14 and 17% of the patients who were on steroids, either the slow taper or the short taper. And basically, the overall dose of steroids that they got was significantly lower in the group that got this other medication. So that's part of the reason it sort of led to this quick approval of the medicine. Other things that were really impressive about it were that you were able to taper the prednisone, and then also patients really had a significant improvement in other parameters. So SF36 is a form that, if you guys are in any of the clinical trials, you'll fill out, that basically talks about your physical health and your mental health. And it's sort of just a validated measure of looking across trials at how patients are feeling physically and mentally, and then also fatigue scores. So it improved in all of these different domains. It also improved in your use of steroids, and your ability to stay in remission. So it was very effective. It was also used in Tocilizumab, which is another sort of large vessel vasculitis. In these studies, we didn't get quite as great a result as we did in the giant cell arteritis studies. But there was a tendency towards doing better with this disease as well. So it may reduce the incidence of relapse, but it didn't quite meet all the endpoints that in the study, so we don't have full approval for it in this disease. In Europe, they basically will use this medication for relapsing or refractory Tocilizumab. So it sounds really great, of course, and we were really excited that it got approved and that we can use it for these diseases, and we don't have to use steroids for 2 years plus. But there are obviously side effects with all of the medicines that we use. So some of the precautions, you can get an increase in your liver enzymes. Of course, you get an increase in your infectious risk. You don't want to use it in anybody who has a history of diverticulitis, because it can increase the risk of perforation. Herpes zoster reactivation. So before you start before any of you guys are getting started on biologics, definitely have that conversation with your doctor about vaccinations. I know Dr. Langford had mentioned it earlier in her talk. This is something that's really important because these are preventable diseases that if we get the vaccinations in before we start some of these heavy-duty drugs, it can really prevent a lot of complications down the road. So talk to them about what you've gotten vaccinated for, what you can get vaccinated for safely, and I'm happy to answer questions on that as well. You can get an increase in your cholesterol levels on this medication, and you can get an increase in some of your liver enzyme abnormalities. It can also decrease some of your white blood cell counts. So what we do on our side is basically make sure that when we see you, we're checking your blood counts, we're checking your liver function, and we're checking your cholesterol levels. We're checking that before you start, and then every 2 months or so while you're on the medication. And of course, before we started, we were getting checked to make sure that you don't have tuberculosis or hepatitis. Those are things that we screen for. So that sort of covers a little bit of tocilizumab and the glucocorticoids.